They say twins share one heartbeat. I learned early that ours beat out of sync. I grew up believing love had rules, and in our small apartment overlooking the Rhone, my parents followed them faithfully, rules that always seemed to favor Vivienne. She was the golden one. Loud, magnetic, a natural performer who could turn mistakes into charm. I was quieter, careful, the kind of child who colored inside the lines and thought that being good would be enough. It never was. My first memory of unfairness began with ice cream. I chose wild strawberry, she chose chestnut. Mine melted too fast, dripping down my wrist like diluted blood, while hers stayed perfect, glossy under the sun. My parents laughed and said, "Vivienne always knows how to pick the best things in life." I remember dropping my half-eaten cone into the trash. They didn't notice. As we grew, everything became a contest, grades, clothes, even friends. I worked for every point I earned. Vivienne copied homework, skipped classes, smiled her way through everything. Yet it was always her they praised. "Be more like your sister," my mother would say, as if perfection could be borrowed. In our final year of high school, Vivienne begged me to lie, to tell our parents I'd accidentally deleted her university acceptance email. She said she couldn't face being a disappointment. I agreed out of guilt, out of habit. But that night at dinner she cried and pointed at me. "Elena deleted my email on purpose." My parents believed her without hesitation. I wasn't allowed to speak for a month. That was the first time I felt something darker than sadness. It was the birth of quiet resentment, the kind that doesn't shout, it waits. If you're still listening, we want to sincerely thank you for spending your time with us. Truly means a lot. We'd love to know, where in the world are you watching from? Drop your country in the comments and let's see how far this message has reached. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, I highly recommend doing it now so you won't miss any of our upcoming stories. These aren't just ordinary stories, they're filled with meaningful life lessons that can inspire, teach, and stay with you long after the video ends. Hit that subscribe button and join our growing community. Munich 2022. The sky that morning was a cold shade of blue, the kind that looked expensive and untouchable. I stood among hundreds of graduates in black robes, clutching my diploma in one hand in the hope that, just this once, my parents might look at me and see someone worth being proud of. When my name was called, I walked across the stage, feeling the weight of sleepless nights and endless lines of code stitched into that moment. My thesis on blockchain security had earned top distinction, a small miracle in a field dominated by men. I searched the audience for familiar faces, and there they were. My mother, polite smile, my father recording on his phone, and Vivienne in a red silk dress that turned more heads than the graduates did. After the ceremony, I walked toward them with my diploma still warm in my hands. "Congratulations," my mother said, already glancing around. "Such a beautiful ceremony. It's just a shame Vivienne couldn't be part of it." I froze. "She's right there," I said. My mother's smile tightened. "You know what I mean." Vivienne laughed softly. "Honestly, this diploma should have been mine." She reached out, touching the parchment like it was a piece of jewelry she'd misplaced. "You just had the time, the funding, the personality for it." I stared at her. "You dropped out of 2 programs." She shrugged. "Technicalities." Then, in front of my parents and a group of classmates nearby, she slipped off my graduation cap and placed it on her head. "There," she said, posing for a photo. My parents laughed, charmed, as if she'd performed some harmless magic trick. I heard the click of the camera and something snapped inside me. Years of silence, of taking the blame, of being the reasonable twin. I looked at her and said quietly, "Do you remember senior year? The email from Sciences Pa?" Her smile faltered. I turned to my parents. "She asked me to lie, said she couldn't handle being called a failure. So I did. And she repaid me by telling you I deleted it out of jealousy." The air went still. My father lowered his phone. My mother blinked fast, trying to assemble disbelief into a sentence. Vivienne's lips trembled but no tears came. "That's not true," she whispered. I handed her the diploma. "Keep it if it means that much." Then I walked away, leaving them under the banner of Technische Universität München, frozen like actors whose script had just burned. That night my father knocked on my dorm door. He looked older, smaller somehow. "I didn't know," he said. His voice cracked. "I should have known." I wanted to forgive him, but the ache was too deep, too old. "You chose not to know," I said, and shut the door gently. The next morning, my phone buzzed with an overdraft alert. Then another. And another. My bank account empty. The transaction list felt like a taunt. €312, a wine shop in Friedrichshain. €487, Tropicana Amusement Park, Stuttgart. €1,200, Lingerie Boutique, Paris. All charged through a shared Amazon account from years ago, one I hadn't used since high school. I called the bank immediately, reporting fraud, freezing the account. The clerk on the line told me the purchases had been authorized with a linked address, my parents' home in Lyon. Then a text arrived. You humiliated me in front of them. Call it compensation for emotional distress. Vivienne. I stared at the screen until my vision blurred. That quiet rage I'd felt at the ceremony hardened into something heavier, sharper. Not hate, clarity. For 26 years, I'd believed family meant loyalty. That love could be repaired if you worked hard enough, stayed calm enough, forgave enough. But standing there in my dorm room, broken hollow, I realized I'd mistaken endurance for virtue. That was the night I began keeping a folder labeled evidence. Berlin, summer 2022. A new city, a new job, a clean slate, or so I thought. It started small, strange emails from HR asking to confirm that I was taking medical leave. I hadn't requested any. Then my keycard stopped working. I drove to the office at 2 in the morning, heart hammering, to find out that someone pretending to be me had called in, citing severe depression, and asking for my access to be suspended. The next week, I received a letter from a credit agency confirming 7 new credit cards opened under my name. Total charges, €28,000. Luxury brands, designer shoes, Hermes, Louboutin. The addresses on the invoices pointed to one person, Vivienne. I confronted my parents first. They sounded tired. My mother said, "She's just going through a rough time, Elena. Don't overreact." Overreact? I said, almost laughing. She's committing crimes in my name. My father sighed. She's still your sister. That sentence, "she's still your sister," had been their shield all my life. As if blood could erase evidence. Then came the worst blow. A message from my ex Lyon. "Hey, I got a weird request from your dating profile. You okay?" Attached was a screenshot, my photo, my name, my age. The bio was wrong. Wild heart. Tech genius. Looking for trouble. The grammar was sloppy, the kind Vivienne never noticed. That night I whispered to myself, it's like being hunted by your own reflection. I stopped sleeping. Every notification felt like an attack. Emails, letters, even shadows in my apartment seemed to move wrong. I started locking my phone in a drawer at night, terrified she'd somehow reach through the screen. Then I called Adrian, my old classmate from TUM, now a lawyer at a cybersecurity firm. When I told him everything, he didn't ask if I was sure. He just said, "We'll fix this. Start collecting every trace." We filed a cease and desist letter, sent formal notices to banks, credit bureaus, and my employer. Then Adrian helped me file a police report with the Berlin Mitte precinct. Identity theft, fraud, harassment. Still, I knew legal steps weren't enough. Vivienne had always thrived in the shadows, charm, gossip, reputation. So I pulled her there into the light. I started a Twitter thread, #twinfraud. 40 posts, each with screenshots, receipts, timestamps, video stills from my apartment camera showing her sneaking in with my parents' spare key. I wasn't cruel, I was precise. Within 24 hours, my DMs flooded. A former roommate from Paris. She stole €4,000 from me. A bartender in Berlin. She told everyone I copied her cocktail recipes. A girl from Munich. She sold fake Hermes bags under the name Vivi's Vault. The illusion cracked. Vivienne's kingdom of charm and chaos began to crumble in public view. But the strangest thing happened next. I didn't feel triumphant. Just steady. Like standing in the eye of a storm I'd finally stopped running from. Because for the first time, truth was no longer something I begged for. It was something I owned. And as I stared at my phone, watching the thread go viral, I realized, truth alone wouldn't save me. If I wanted to be free, I couldn't just defend my name. I had to destroy the version of me that still believed family was sacred. That was the moment Elena Moreau was born again. Not as someone's twin, not as someone's scapegoat, but as a woman who finally understood that survival sometimes looks like revenge told in public. The courtroom was colder than the streets outside. I could hear the snow tapping faintly against the high glass windows, a sound so soft it almost felt cruel. How calm the world could be while my insides trembled. Vivienne sat at the defense table, dressed in a gray coat too big for her shoulders. Her hair was lighter now, shorter, like she'd tried to shed her old self along with the evidence. When the judge entered, she looked up, her eyes glossy, searching for sympathy. I didn't look back. I'd spent too many years reading her eyes, trying to find sincerity in a maze of manipulation. The prosecutor displayed the files, forged documents, fake credit cards, screenshots of dating profiles that used my face, my name, my degree. One after another. The screen filled with the ghosts of a life I didn't live but still had to pay for. Vivienne began to cry when the messages appeared. Her own words, threatening, mocking, written in my tone. "You took everything from me first," one message read. Her defense attorney argued emotional trauma, sibling rivalry, a shared identity crisis. I could almost laugh at how poetic they made her crimes sound. My parents sat 2 rows behind, silent. My mother kept twisting her wedding ring. My father stared at the floor. When the prosecutor mentioned the bank transfers, my mother's eyes flickered toward me. Not an apology but confusion, like she still couldn't believe her golden child could do this. When my turn came, I stood. My hands shook slightly but my voice didn't. I told them what it felt like to lose not just money or reputation, but ownership of myself. To watch your reflection move without you, speak in your voice, destroy your credibility while smiling with your face. The judge listened, pen steady over the notepad. "Identity theft within a family," she said quietly. "This is not common, but perhaps it's the most tragic kind." Vivienne sobbed louder, shoulders collapsing in rehearsed despair. For a second I saw the little girl she used to be, the one who hid behind me during thunderstorms. But empathy is dangerous. It always comes disguised as memory. I looked away. The verdict came in muted tones. Suspended sentence. Community service. Mandatory therapy. Full restitution. My lawyer Adrian squeezed my shoulder. The gesture meant victory, but it didn't feel like one. Vivienne mouthed something as they let her out. I think it was sorry, but maybe it was just sorry you won. When I stepped outside, the cold hit me like clarity. Snow was falling thick and patient, covering the city in white silence. I walked slowly, my breath clouding the air. For the first time in years, my phone didn't buzz with her messages. Justice isn't revenge. It's closure disguised as paperwork. I didn't feel triumphant, only emptied. The kind of relief that comes after a long fever breaks. The kind that makes you wonder if healing means forgetting, or if remembering is what keeps you sane. I stopped by the courthouse steps and watched the snow collect on my gloves. In that quiet, I realized something simple. Vivienne had always needed an audience. Maybe my silence was the punishment she feared most. Dr. Kessler's office smelled faintly of pine and ink. A long bookshelf divided the room, filled with titles on trauma, attachment, and family systems. The kind of books that tried to explain what love breaks and what it rebuilds. We sat in a triangle, my parents on one side, Vivienne and I on the other. The distance between us felt measured, mathematical. Dr. Kessler began softly, "Let's talk about balance. What did each of you carry for the other?" My mother looked down. My father cleared his throat. No one answered. So Dr. Kessler leaned back and said what none of us dared to. "You made one daughter your pride, and the other your penance." The sentence cut through the air like glass. My mother began to cry, quietly, almost respectfully. My father's face went pale. For years they had built our family on denial, painting Vivienne's mistakes as misfortune and my endurance as duty. Now it stood naked in the room. Vivienne looked small, her hands clasped, nails bitten down. "I didn't mean to ruin her life," she said, voice trembling. "I just wanted to matter." For a second, the child in her spoke again. And maybe somewhere deep down, the child in me wanted to answer. But I didn't. I had learned that compassion without boundaries becomes self-destruction. When it was my turn, I said, "I forgive you." Her eyes lit up until I added, "But I don't want a relationship." The air shifted. Even Dr. Kessler froze. "Forgiveness isn't reunion," I continued. "It's release. I need to move forward without rewriting the past." After the session, Vivienne stayed behind. My parents followed her out, offering comfort, perhaps clinging to the daughter they still believed they could fix. I walked alone down the hallway, the fluorescent lights flickering above me. Berlin felt different that spring, lighter, quieter. I rented a small apartment near the river, started freelancing as a cybersecurity consultant. There was irony in that, I suppose, building firewalls for others when I'd spent years trying to build one around myself. Sometimes I'd pass by a bar near Alexanderplatz and catch a glimpse of Vivienne behind the counter, shaking cocktails, laughing. She'd finally gone to bartending school, like she'd mentioned once in therapy. The sight didn't hurt. It just felt distant, like watching someone else's dream unfold. My parents moved closer to her, calling occasionally to tell me she was doing better. I listened, smiled, and changed the subject. I no longer needed to compete for space in their affection. Detachment wasn't bitterness, it was freedom. In my final session with Dr. Kessler, she asked, "Do you think peace feels empty because you're used to chaos?" I smiled. Maybe, but emptiness isn't always a void. Sometimes it's just room to breathe. When I left her office, the city was drenched in afternoon gold. The river glimmered, street musicians played something tender and off-key. For once I didn't think about the past. Only the quiet pulse of my own heartbeat, steady, unshared. Forgiveness had no fanfare, no dramatic closure. It was simply choosing not to reopen old wounds just to prove they existed. I never cut ties with Vivienne to punish her. I did it to finally hear myself think. Amsterdam smelled like rain and possibility. When I first arrived, I carried only one suitcase and a folder of documents under a new name. Not fake, but reborn. The Dutch authorities had approved my identity restoration. My credit was cleared, and my digital footprint was scrubbed clean. For the first time in years, I felt like a person again, not a headline or a case file. Revolut had reached out a month earlier. They wanted a senior security engineer with first-hand knowledge of cybercrime and social engineering. I didn't tell them that my expertise came from my twin. I just said, "I've seen how fragile trust can be." They nodded. They hired me. My days fell into rhythm. I lived in a quiet canal-side apartment where morning light spilled through large windows, painting everything in gentle gold. The city moved differently here. Slower, more deliberate, like everyone was breathing in sync. I walked to work, laptop bag slung across my shoulder, feeling the kind of peace that comes only when no one knows your story. Every week on Sunday mornings I ran along the Amstel River. It became a ritual, the same path, the same silence, the same small miracle of freedom in every step. The water shimmered beside me like glass, carrying fragments of the sky. I used to think of running as escape. Now it felt like returning to my own body, to my own name. My life became simple. Clean credit, clean code, clean conscience. The irony wasn't lost on me. That I, once a victim of identity theft, now protected others from losing themselves online. I designed systems that traced anomalies, built algorithms that recognized patterns of deceit. Each success was a small private act of justice. Every alert I prevented felt like rewriting history in my favor. Sometimes, after long days of coding, I'd sit by the river and watch the houseboats rock gently with the current. The city glowed quietly in the dusk, bicycles whispering across bridges, people laughing in cafes. No one here knew the name Vivienne. No one knew what had been taken from me. And maybe that was the point. I started writing again, not code but journal entries. One night I wrote a single line that stayed with me. I rebuilt myself from stolen fragments. That was my truth. Every scar, every loss, every betrayal had been a shard of something I could finally shape into a whole. I didn't need to erase the past, just rearrange it into something that made sense. I changed my hairstyle, my wardrobe, even my accent softened with time. But the most significant change was internal, a quiet detachment from needing closure. I no longer wanted apologies. I didn't want revenge or reconciliation. I just wanted to exist without being compared, mistaken, or mirrored. In Amsterdam, nobody saw me as the twin. I was just Elena, a woman who worked in tech, who liked black coffee and long runs by the water, who sometimes smiled at strangers but kept her distance. It was ordinary, and that ordinariness felt sacred. One evening, while updating a client's digital security framework, I stumbled upon a flag name, Vivienne L. Sullivan. For a second, my heart stuttered. It wasn't her, just another person, another name. But I sat there, staring at it, feeling the old ache pulse faintly like a scar under new skin. I realized then that healing doesn't mean forgetting. It means learning to live without flinching when the past brushes against the present. Twins are mirrors, one reflecting light, the other absorbing shadow. That's what I told myself during the worst years, when I tried to understand why Vivienne and I turned out so differently despite sharing the same DNA, the same childhood, the same heartbeat once upon a time. Maybe it was never about good and bad, victim and villain. Maybe we were both broken by the same imbalance. She needed too much love, and I needed too much fairness. I've stopped hating her. That surprised me. Hatred takes energy, and I have none left to give. Sometimes I catch myself remembering small, harmless things, her laugh echoing through our hallway, her hair tangled with mine when we shared a pillow as kids. There was love once. Maybe a part of me still carries it, like an ember that refuses to die completely. But love can rot when it's not returned. It decays quietly, leaving only residue. A ghost of warmth that can no longer comfort you. That's what happened to us. Vivienne didn't just steal my name. She stole the version of me that still believed in family. For a long time I thought I wanted her punished. Now I just want her to be okay. Far away, living whatever life she's chosen without me in it. Maybe that's forgiveness, or maybe it's fatigue disguised as mercy. Either way, it's peace. When people ask if I have siblings, I still pause. Sometimes I say yes. Sometimes I say no. Both answers feel true. At night, when the canals shimmer like veins of silver, I whisper a quiet thank you, not to her, but to the silence that came after. It's the kind of silence that rebuilds you one breath at a time. I used to believe twins share one heartbeat. Now I know better. We start that way, yes, two lives synchronized by nature. But somewhere along the path, one heart learns to beat alone. And that, I think, is the truest form of survival. I keep a small box on the top shelf of my closet. It's wooden, pale birch with a tiny brass latch that clicks softly when I open it. On the lid, written in my own handwriting, are the words, "Read, not replied." Inside are letters, one for every month since my parents moved to Berlin. They always arrive on the same kind of creamy stationery, sealed with a faint lavender scent my mother used to wear. The handwriting belongs to my father, small and careful, as if he still believes neatness could fix what words cannot. First, I opened them. The early ones were full of apologies that didn't sound like apologies. We only did what we thought was best. Family is complicated, Elena. Vivienne is getting better now, you be proud. Then came the updates. Vivienne had finished her bartending course. Vivienne had opened a small bar. Vivienne was trying. Every sentence felt like a loop pulling me back into a world I had already escaped. So I stopped opening them. Now every time one arrives, I slide it into the box without reading. It's become a quiet ritual. Not bitter, not angry, just maintenance. Like cleaning a wound that has already scarred. The box has grown heavy. Sometimes on rainy evenings, I take it down and run my fingers over the envelopes. Each one represents a conversation that will never happen. And yet, there's comfort in that. Because silence, I've learned, can be gentler than words. One Sunday morning, after my usual run along the Amstel, I returned to find another envelope waiting in the mail slot. Same handwriting. Same lavender. Same weight of things unsaid. I don't know what changed that day. Maybe it was the calm in the air. Or maybe I was finally strong enough to look without trembling. But I decided to open it. I sat by the window, peeled the seal, unfolded the letter. It was blank. No words. No apology. No explanation. Just the soft texture of untouched paper, as if even the ink had given up trying. I stared at it for a long time, waiting for a message to appear. Something invisible, hidden between the fibers. But there was nothing. Only silence. And strangely, that was the first time it didn't hurt. I smiled. Not the kind of smile that hides pain, but the kind that accepts its absence. For the first time, silence felt like love. Maybe they had finally understood that saying nothing was kinder than saying too much. Maybe this was their way of letting me go. I placed the letter back in the box, closed the latch and whispered, "Thank you. Not for what they did, but for what they didn't." That night I dreamed of Lyon, not the small apartment by the river or the fights at the dinner table, but the sound of ice cream bells echoing down the street, two little girls running barefoot, one choosing chestnut, one choosing strawberry. For the first time, the memory didn't sting. It just existed, simple, unburdened. Maybe that's what closure really is. When a memory stops asking for justice and simply becomes a story you can tell yourself without bleeding. If I've learned anything through all of this, it's that not all blood is family. Some people are bound to you by history, not by love. And learning to see the difference is the beginning of peace. Cutting ties doesn't make you cruel. It makes you honest. There's a certain mercy in stepping away, in refusing to keep playing a role in someone else's chaos. You can love people and still decide they no longer get access to you. Sometimes, distance is the most compassionate form of affection. For a long time, I thought healing meant reconciliation, phone calls, apologies, second chances. But healing, I've realized, is quieter. It's the decision to stop waiting for the past to fix itself. It's the courage to build a life that doesn't require anyone's permission. Identity isn't what you're born with. It's what you rebuild after being broken. Vivienne stole more than my money and my name. She stole the illusion that family automatically means safety. But in losing that illusion, I found something stronger. I built myself from scratch, from the fragments she left behind. And in doing so, I learned that self-worth isn't granted. It's earned in silence, in perseverance, in the small acts of choosing yourself every single day. Some people will never apologize and some wounds will never be seen. But you can still heal. You can still wake up one morning, look in the mirror, and see someone who survived the worst kind of betrayal, the one that comes from your own reflection, and still chose to become better, not bitter. When I walk through Amsterdam now, I sometimes see twins laughing, holding hands, dressed alike. It doesn't hurt anymore. I wish them well. Maybe their story will end differently. And sometimes when I pass the post office, I imagine another letter traveling across borders, maybe from them, maybe not. I don't check. I don't need to. The story has already ended in the only way it could. Not with reconciliation, but with peace. Because some love stories don't need reunion. They just need release. And as the city quiets down at night, the canals shimmering under soft orange lights, I think about that last blank letter, and how in its emptiness it said everything I needed to hear. Silence isn't always absence. Sometimes it's forgiveness, learning how to breathe. When I look back now, from the calm of my Amsterdam apartment, from a life that finally feels mine, I see not tragedy but transformation. What once felt like destruction was just the universe clearing space for truth. And in that space I learned more than I ever could from peace. The first lesson: not all blood is family. It took me years to understand that love isn't a guarantee that comes with birth. Sometimes the people who share your DNA are the very ones who wound you deepest. And that's not a reflection of your worth. It's a reflection of their blindness. You don't owe loyalty to pain. You owe loyalty to your own peace. The second lesson: cutting ties doesn't make you cruel. There's a quiet power in walking away, in saying no more without needing revenge. Society tells us forgiveness means reunion, but sometimes forgiveness simply means refusing to bleed for the same people twice. The bravest kind of love is the kind that chooses distance when closeness turns poisonous. The third lesson: identity isn't what you inherit, it's what you rebuild. Vivienne stole my name, my image, my past. But she couldn't steal my resilience. Every time I picked myself up, filing police reports, rebuilding my credit, finding a new city, a new name, I was teaching myself that who I am is not defined by what was taken from me, but by what I created after. You are not what happened to you. You are what you choose next. The fourth lesson: justice and revenge are not the same. In court, when the verdict was read, I expected triumph. Instead, I felt nothing, just the soft ache of release. Justice is paperwork. Healing is personal. The system can punish a crime, but only you can free yourself from its shadow. And that freedom begins the moment you stop needing an audience for your pain. The fifth and final lesson: healing is not about getting back what you lost. It's about no longer needing it. I spent years wanting my parents' approval, my sister's love, the family I imagined we could have been. But somewhere between the blank letter and the quiet streets of Amsterdam, I realized I already had everything I needed. Solitude without loneliness, silence without guilt, and a life that no one could steal from me again. If you're listening to this and you've ever been betrayed by the people you thought would protect you, know this: you are not broken. You're just in the middle of rebuilding. And the person you'll become on the other side of that storm will be stronger, calmer, and more honest than you ever imagined. So if this story touched you, If you've ever had to cut ties to save yourself, please like, share, and subscribe. Not for me, but for every person still learning that sometimes survival itself is the most beautiful comeback story there is.